Hey, Lake Point, Pastor Michael here to get you caught up on the third week of our series, Everything, Everywhere. It's a series where we're exploring our identity and purpose because we believe that doing so provides meaning for, you guessed it, everything, everywhere. Genesis 1 and 2 provide us with a stunning vision of what it looks like to truly be human. This is what we read in the beginning, that God created the heavens and the earth. The emphasis here isn't on how the world was created, but who created it. That we have an intelligent designer who created us as human beings on purpose and for a purpose. The following 24 verses go on to describe in poetic detail how God formed and filled the universe. And then we get to verse 26, in which God makes this amazing statement. Let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will rule over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, and the animals on the earth. Now, as Nate pointed out, the reason this is amazing is because Genesis wasn't the only creation story in the ancient world. There were others, dozens of them, all competing against each other. One of the most popular creation stories was the Enuma Elish from ancient Babylon. In it, the gods were tired of work and started to complain to Marduk, the king of the gods. And he comes up with this ingenious plan to outsource all of their work to humans. Most of the ancient Babylonian creation myths from this period shared a similar idea. The gods are tired and worn out, and so they create humans as cheap slave labor to do the work for them so that they can sit back and relax. This is what makes the Genesis story so shocking. This God, Yahweh, the one true God, is nothing like Marduk and his friends. This God doesn't hate work, rather, he seems to enjoy it. As such, instead of creating humanity to offload all his work because it's beneath him, the story opens with God himself working to create a world for humanity, a place for us to experience and enjoy his presence. Humanity isn't created as cheap slave labor to do his bidding, but rather as his co-creators. That's the language that's used. I mean, listen to what we read in verse 27. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. The writer is clearly trying to emphasize that humans, unlike the rest of creation, were created in God's image. And so what does that mean to be made in the image of God? Well, that word image in Hebrew can be translated as idol or statue. In ancient times, pagan temples would include statues of all their tribal gods so that worshipers could see what their God looked like. However, in the Hebrew creation story, we see that we are God's statues. We make the invisible God visible. We are his representatives. We show the world what God is like. Which is amazing because it affirms that we are not here by accident. God wanted us and designed us to reflect his image. Now, in ancient times, being made in the image of God was not like this new concept, rather it was used all over the ancient world. However, it wasn't used to describe just any human being, it was used to describe royalty, kings over nations. In ancient times, it was widely believed that kings represented the deities of their nations. And as such, royal figures were considered sons adopted by the gods to serve as their representatives to the people. Now, looking back, we can laugh this off as nothing more than propaganda, a way for kings to secure autonomy over civilization. But back then, this way of thinking was woven into the very fabric of the ancient world. Why does this matter? Well, it's because Genesis 1 and 2 were a game changer. It declared that all human beings, not just those with royal blood, but all people, men and women, were made in the image of God, made to be his representatives, made to partner with him, made to rule alongside him. That's why the second half of verse 26 says, let us make human beings in our image to be like us so that they will rule. All throughout chapters 1 and 2, there's this seamless connection between image and rule. The word rule, as we've talked about in the past couple of weeks, can be translated as reign or have dominion. One Hebrew scholar translated it as to actively partner with God in taking the world somewhere. Which is significant because it demonstrates that God created humans to be his partners, not puppets. Sometimes we mistakenly think the sign of spiritual maturity is to just get out of the way and let God do his thing, but that kind of mindset defies logic because God already had his way before he created our world. If he wanted to do it all himself, he wouldn't have created you. But he did create humans, and he made us with identity and calling. So don't buy the lie from culture that you can be anything you want, because you can only be who God made you to be. And God made you in a very unique and specific way. And the calling on your life is so much bigger than your career. It encompasses everything, everywhere. It's not simply what you do for a living, it's why you live. It's about coming alongside God based on the way he has wired you to partner with him in creating a garden-like world. place of delight where families and communities can flourish and thrive, and where people everywhere can experience and enjoy his presence. Genesis chapter 1 verse 28 reads that God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it." We often skip over those words, be fruitful, multiply, and fill, to see the high view God has on parenting. In our culture today, the idea of being a stay-at-home parent is not even considered a job, but to God, it's the very first thing on the human's job description. It's what we like to say here at Lake Point as a high and holy calling. It's really a calling that transcends mere individuals. It's something we all share in. And it's why here at Lake Point, a big part of our vision is to go all in for the next generation. Pastor Nate wrapped up the sermon by actually interviewing 3 of our pastoral team members who work in our family ministries, Ethan, Zach, and Rachel. And each of them spoke about why going all in for the next generation matters so much. And so here's my best attempt at summarizing their thoughts. Ethan reminded us that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today, meaning that the earlier we invest in a child's faith, the greater the impact on their life. He shared from his own story that even as a pastor, his first calling is to be faithful husband and father, and how it takes a whole village, 5 to 10 caring adults in every child's life to help them grow in their God-given identity and calling. Rachel emphasized that every kid is born with deep needs for identity, belonging, and purpose. And those aren't things we invent for ourselves. They're actually gifts from God. And so, who am I? A child of God. Where do I belong? In God's family. What's my purpose? To join him in bringing heaven to earth. She reminded us that kids learn best in safe, fun, relationship-based environments where they feel loved and seen. Zach shared how heavy the challenges are for young people today, record levels of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and confusion. He shared how he sees it firsthand in our youth ministry, but he also spoke from his own story of God rescuing him through the care of parents, mentors, and a church family, and his conviction that many teens don't have that same support. With only 2% of Canadian kids holding a biblical worldview, he reminded us that the mission has never been more urgent. Together, they painted a powerful picture. Lake Point is called to disproportionately invest in the next generation, not just providing childcare or entertainment, but connecting kids and students to Jesus through a web of loving mentors who will walk with them as they discover their God-given identity, belonging, and purpose. That's why we want Lake Point to be known as a church that goes all in for the next generation, because what happens in the heart of a child can change the trajectory of a life, a family, and a future. Well, friends, thanks for listening. Enjoy jumping into discussion questions. I'll see you next time.